It's finally here. One of my most anticipated series of the year, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. The first 2 episodes just dropped. Let's go! Hi, my name is Jackson. Percy Jackson, the book series, has played a huge role in my life. I'm pretty sure it's what got me into reading as a child. I was so fond of this world as a child, and it really means a lot to me. So naturally, when I heard that they were going to make a new series that was going to try to be more faithful to the source material and that the author was behind, I couldn't help but get excited. And it's finally here. We have the first 2 episodes, and I gotta say, it's pretty good. But there's something missing and there's something off about this series, and we're gonna go get into that. But first, I just want to say that after watching these episodes, I decided to go back and reread the chapters that they adapted for the first 2 episodes. I didn't realize this, but the first 2 episodes are about 148 pages of this book. The book's only 375 pages long. So it covers almost 1/3 of the book in 2 episodes. But I read it, I kind of figured out what they left out, what things they got absolutely right, and they did get a lot of things absolutely right. But we're going to dive all into that. But before we dive into what happened in these episodes, I'm going to issue a brief spoiler warning. If you haven't watched these episodes or read the books, which I highly recommend, go ahead, pause the video, go do those things, and then when you're done, come back, watch, resume. But if you're someone who's already seen these episodes or just don't care about spoilers, let's go dive into this thing. The first episode begins the same way the book does, with Percy warning the viewer about being a half-blood, which to open the series this way is just so good. We are then introduced to Percy as a child, where he has reoccurring visions of mythical creatures in everyday life. Anywho, Percy and his best friend Grover, which, for some reason, Grover doesn't have crutches in this series. What are we doing, Disney? What are we doing? Why? Why remove that? That helps explain the mist. Like, why? Why are you removing that? All that aside, they head to the Metropolitan Museum of Art with their Latin class, chaperoned by Mr. Brunner, their Latin teacher, and Mrs. Dodds. After Percy breaks his pencil, Mr. Brunner gives him a pen. Keep that in the back of your mind. That will be important later. During lunch, Nancy Bobofit picks on Percy and Grover, frustrating Percy, and then all of a sudden, Nancy is launched into a water fountain and blames Percy for pushing her, even though he didn't touch her. All of a sudden, the pen Mr. Brunner gave Percy starts vibrating, and Mrs. Dodds starts speaking to Percy telepathically, saying that she found him and demanding to know where it is. All while this is happening, she is transforming into a fury. She tackles Percy, but before she can do anything, the pen Percy was given has transformed into a sword, and he cuts her wing off, and Dodds turns to dust. After being helped to his feet, Percy asks about Mrs. Dodds, to which no one at the school can remember a Mrs. Dodds. Percy is then expelled from school for what happened at the museum with Nancy and returns home. Percy then finds his mom, who tells him that they are going to spend the weekend at a cabin in Montauk. At the cabin, Sally reveals why Percy is different from everyone else, and it's because his dad was a Greek god, which makes Percy a demigod, or a half-blood. Percy does not believe her, doesn't believe in all this Greek god mumbo-jumbo. But then Grover appears at the door, warning that something is coming for him. But Grover is different somehow. His legs look like that of a goat. Grover explains that he is a satyr, kind of backing up what Sally just told Percy, but he's still not a believer. Anyway, the 3 rush to the car and speed off to a camp, which Grover explains is a safe place for demigods. But as they draw near to the campground, the Minotaur catches up to them. And guess what? He's wearing underwear, just like the book. It's small details like that that I really appreciate, that stand out to me in this series. Love it. While attempting to stop the Minotaur, Sally crashes the car and the 3 escape the wreck and head towards the camp. Sally then tells Percy that she can't go any farther because she is a human. She sends Percy and Grover ahead while she tries to distract the Minotaur. That obviously doesn't work too well, and the Minotaur snatches her and Sally turns to gold dust. This obviously makes Percy mad, and he decides to take on the Minotaur. During the fight, Percy manages to get on the Minotaur's back and rips off one of his injured horns and uses it to stab the Minotaur in the head. While the Minotaur is turning to dust, Percy falls off and hits his head on a rock, and we fade to black with a bunch of campers surrounding Percy's body. That's the end of the first episode. The second episode begins with Percy waking up for the first time to see a girl standing over his bed. All she says is, "You drool when you sleep," just like the book. And Percy passes out again. The second time, he wakes up and Grover is there, confirming the whole Minotaur attack and his mom's death being real. Percy leaves the medbay to go find his father, but actually runs into Mr. D. Grover explains to Percy that Mr. D is actually Dionysus, the god of wine. Mr. Bruner then shows up, but not in his wheelchair, but rather as a centaur. Grover tells Percy that Mr. Bruner is actually Chiron, the mythical trainer of heroes such as Hercules. Chiron then gives Percy a tour of the campground and drops him off at Hermes' cabin. Here Percy meets Luke, son of Hermes and cabin counselor, who tries to help Percy find something he's good at to get the attention of his father so that he can claim him. After failed attempts at archery and crafting, Percy seems to have given up hope. That night, Percy is taken to the bathroom by Clarice and some Ares kids to receive his first swirly at Camp Half-Blood. But as his head is about to hit the toilet water, the water bursts out of the pipes and rushes Clarice and the other Ares kids, leaving them soaked. But Percy is completely dry. They rush out and Percy sees Annabeth in the doorway, who recruits Percy to join her Capture the Flag team. And it's finally time for the iconic Capture the Flag scene. The two teams go off to find the flags, but Annabeth takes Percy out in the middle of nowhere and leaves him there. After a while of seeing no action and really being bored, Clarice and her buddies sneak up and attack Percy to get revenge for the bathroom incident. The fight takes them all the way down to the river, where the battle all of a sudden flips in Percy's favor. He is able to fend off the other Ares kids and is even able to break Clarice's special spear. Then Luke and the rest of the blue team rushes to the shore with the enemy flag, ending the game. Annabeth then appears and congratulates Percy, but then for some reason shoves him into the river. Percy is obviously upset about this, but then all of a sudden his wounds start healing and a trident symbol appears over his head. Poseidon has claimed Percy as his son. Chiron then tells Percy that he must embark on a quest to find and return Zeus's Master Bolt, which has been stolen. And Chiron believes that Hades has taken the bolt and hid it in the underworld. Percy refuses to take this quest at first, but then Grover tells Percy that his mom is alive in the underworld and that he might be able to save her. This changes Percy's mind and he accepts the quest. That's the end of the first two episodes. There's a lot to talk about here, a ton, but I just want to start off by saying, this is so much better than the movies. The first two episodes of this series is already better than the two movies we've gotten previously. I mean, just so much more faithful to the books, to the source material, and does recreate that magic that I felt while reading the book. And I think the perfect example of this is Camp Half-Blood. Camp Half-Blood in this series looks exactly like how I imagined it while I was reading this back when I was 9 or 10. Just seeing all these things that I've read on the screen was crazy. It was so cool. And Walker Strobel, I think that's how you say his last name. He is the perfect casting choice for Percy Jackson. Now, would I have liked to see black hair, see green eyes? Yes, absolutely. But if you get past that point, this dude's perfect. He plays him so well. And that kind of brings me to my next point. Leading up to the release of the show, I was really worried about casting. But I think these first two episodes kind of eased my fears. They all did extremely well in their roles and are really believable in their roles. The only issues I have are with the writing and the direction of these actors, not their performances. These characters feel like way tamer versions of their book counterparts. Now, obviously that's going to happen, but this is extremely more tame. Percy is not as sassy or as witty as he is in the book. Grover is not the coward and the fearful kind of nerdy guy that he was in the book. Mr. D cares way too much about what's going on at Camp Half-Blood. I mean, in the books, he did not give a crap about any of the campers or his job or anything. And here he's like yelling at Percy to accept the quest because the fate of the universe is at stake. It's like, who is this? The casting choice, spot on, perfect. And obviously, you're going to make changes. You're going to make characters less extreme versions of themselves. But if you start changing it a little too much, they start seeming like different characters. But even though the character changes are pretty big in the show, the biggest problem, the one that stands out the most, the one that gave me an uneasy feeling while I was watching these first 2 episodes, is the speed of the show. This show goes through the material so fast, like lightning fast. I mean, we're to the Minotaur scene about 20 minutes in to the first episode. Do you know how much characterization and setup takes place right before the Minotaur sequence? There's a lot. Even before the Fury scene at the museum, we know a ton about Percy and his past. Here, we don't really. We know his mom named him Perseus and that he sometimes sees weird magical beings, but that's it. In the books, we know that he's on his last leg, that if he gets into trouble one more time, he's getting expelled, that he's had a history of getting in trouble in the past, that he struggles with school, that he really loves his Latin class, and that Mr. Brunner expects so much of him and truly treats Percy's education as of vital importance to his future, for obvious reasons. I mean, he needs to know this Greek stuff because he's a demigod. The show just goes so fast that we miss all that. We miss all that background, all that stuff that really fleshes out the character of Percy, of Grover, of Mr. Brunner. They do get certain things right, like the museum sequence they did pretty well, except for the fact that Mrs. Dodds doesn't take him into the museum. She just turns into a Fury in the open, which is like, man, the mist is really powerful in this series. It feels so rushed, and because it's so rushed, they miss out on so many key moments from the first 9 chapters. For instance, this is the biggest one for me, there was no fate scene in the first episode, which that's a pretty big plot moment. That's a pretty big moment for not just this book, but for the entirety of the Percy Jackson series. I mean, this was a moment that is referenced in the last book. This thing is huge. It's of vital importance that we see Percy watching the Middle Fate cut the string. That's important. It changes things. It changes how Grover sees things. It changes how Percy sees things. This is an important scene, and you just have to make it a minute long tops. You just have to have him on the bus or in the truck that he's in even, going by a street and seeing the 3 old ladies and seeing one cut the string. That's it. That's all you have to do, and we don't put that in. It's so important, and it blows me away that this scene wasn't in the first episode. Another moment they leave out is Luke training Percy with a sword. There's many reasons why I feel like this scene is important and should have been left in. One, it shows that Percy actually trained with swords and is actually a good swordsman. We don't really get that impression in the show. Instead, we're just thrown into this scene where Percy fights Clarice and a couple of her cabin mates and defeats them. It's like, man, he went from just being introduced to this world to defeating one of the best warriors at camp. But if we include this scene, then we understand that, oh, he has training. He knows how to use a sword. It also goes to kind of allude to the fact that he's Poseidon's son, because he gets super good with the sword when he pours water on the top of his head. The show lacks that foreshadowing to the trident moment, when the trident's over his head. It doesn't really allude to that except for the bathroom scene. I think little moments like this, subtle hints to the fact that he does better when water's around, would have made the capture the flag scene feel more significant, the reveal that he's Poseidon's son more significant, all that. There's also no Oracle scene. He's just given the quest by Chiron, which I feel is a big missed opportunity, and I thought was one of the mistakes of the movies, is that they introduced the Oracle in the second movie. The Oracle is a big part of almost all 5 of the books. So to leave the Oracle out is really weird to me. Also, no Hellhound during Capture the Flag. This one I can understand them excluding, but also it goes to allude to the fact that there is a traitor in Camp Half-Blood. We're not getting any impression of that right now. And I think that's kind of weird. The betrayal at the end of the book is pivotal for the rest of the series. And so the fact that we're not alluding to that yet in the first 2 episodes, kind of weird to me. Kind of weird. This one is a very minimal absence, but I kind of wanted it. There's no mentions of weird weather changes throughout the world, or even really showing of that. I mean, yeah, they kind of grayed out the Manhattan skyline when it's panning to Percy going back home. And yeah, there's kind of a huge storm when the Minotaur happens, but it's not showing that the world's really being affected by the fights that Poseidon and Zeus are having. This would have been a nice, subtle thing that you could do to show the impacts of this feud that these brothers are having. Because they're trying to get through the first 2 episodes as fast as they can, jam as much content as they can in there, that leads to some weird changes to try to help it flow faster. One of those is Sally telling Percy about the Greek gods and his father. That felt weird. That should have been an episode 2 thing. I think this would have been a great way to encourage new viewers to stick around to the 2nd episode, leaving it at the end like, oh my gosh, I need to know what's going on. Why is Percy different from everyone else? You don't find that out in the book till like the 5th and 6th chapter. Here you're finding it out in the first 20 minutes. And Disney, don't you want people to keep watching? You need to have that little mystery there. Luke telling Percy about Talia. That was kind of weird as well. It should have been Grover, because that's important to Grover's character. Riptide being at the Minotaur fight. That was kind of weird. He doesn't get Riptide until after the first 9 chapters. That kind of also makes the capture the flag scene more impressive, is that he defeats Clarice without a sword that he likes. Percy not being in the water during Capture the Flag. This one was just really weird to me. The whole reason Percy defeats Clarice and the other Ares kids is because he's in the water. That's also why Annabeth pushes him back in. It's because she saw how he acted in the water. It was like, maybe this is all connected, and then pushes him in to see really if he is the son of Poseidon. And her theory was confirmed. Here, she just does it for some reason, and you and Percy kind of have the same reaction. It's like, what is wrong with you? And then it's the reveal, and then you're like, oh. But if you did it like in the book, it would have made a lot more sense, and there wouldn't have been that brief moment of questioning what Annabeth was doing. Grover discovering Sally is in the underworld. That didn't need to be included. Overall, I was pretty happy with the first 2 episodes. Recreating that magic, the casting was actually really good. And I think the first 2 episodes do set the stage for a pretty good next 6 episodes. But it really is just a shame how much they took out and what changes they made, because it really diminishes the great parts of the first 2 episodes. Hopefully it's improved in the next parts. I mean, you got 6 episodes to cover the next 2/3 of the book. So hopefully they're able to adapt that all well. But lastly, a quick word to Disney. Disney, it is okay to make a Disney Plus series more than 8 episodes long. And it's actually possible. We've seen it in the past and people seem to enjoy it. You don't have to make a series 8 episodes, 40 minutes long a piece. You can make them longer. It's okay. People enjoy that. People enjoy that. And people would have enjoyed this a lot more if each episode was an hour. I truly believe that. But that's my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Percy Jackson. Let me know down in the comment section below what you guys thought. And hey, if you made it this far, comment below Riptide. As always, I appreciate y'all stopping by. I love you guys, and until next time, peace out, bro skillets.